What kind of man laughs at a $500 fine in open court, then stops laughing when the judge quietly finds 50,000 more with his name all over it? Drop a comment telling us what you think the right punishment should be before this story is over, because by the end, most people watching change their minds twice. At 9:14 on a cold Tuesday morning in Providence, Rhode Island, a room full of strangers watched confidence turn into panic one breath at a time. Hit that subscribe button if you believe arrogance always leaves fingerprints. Because what started as a routine municipal hearing inside Courtroom B on Dorrance Street became the kind of moment people replay in their heads for weeks. Like this video, if you believe money should never buy disrespect. And wait until you hear the sentence Judge Caprio delivered after the laughter stopped, because it wasn't the number that shocked the room most. It was why. The man at the center of it stood out before he even spoke. Ethan Vale was 42 years old, 6 feet tall, clean-shaven, with the polished kind of face that looked expensive. His charcoal Brioni suit fit like it had been measured on him that morning. A blue Hermes tie sat perfect against a white shirt with silver collar stays. On his wrist was a rose-gold Patek Philippe Nautilus that flashed every time he moved his hand. He carried his confidence the way other people carried umbrellas, like he had learned not to step outside without it. He was the founder and CEO of Vale Axis Logistics, a regional freight and warehouse company that had grown from 3 trucks to a fleet spread across Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. Local business magazines called him relentless. Employees called him brilliant when he was listening and impossible when he was. Online, there were photos of him beside ribbon cuttings, charity galas, a black 2024 Mercedes-Maybach GLS 600, and a summer house in Watch Hill with glass walls facing the ocean. That morning, though, none of that was supposed to matter. He was in court over a municipal citation. Case number MC-26-1147. City of Providence versus Ethan Vale Enterprises. The listed violation was simple on paper. Obstruction of a marked emergency access lane outside St. Agnes Community Clinic on January 17, 2026, at 7:58 a.m. Base penalty, $500. That was it. At least that was what Ethan thought. At the bench sat Judge Frank Caprio, calm as still water, glasses low on his nose, reviewing the file with the same unhurried focus he would have given someone arguing over a broken tail light or an expired meter. To his right, Clerk Angela Romano had a stack of folders arranged in neat color tabs. To his left stood City Prosecutor Daniel Keene, younger than he looked from a distance, broad-shouldered, careful, the kind of man who rarely interrupted because he knew timing mattered more than volume. Behind Ethan, the gallery was half full. A retired couple waiting on a property complaint, a college kid chewing the inside of his cheek over a parking appeal, a woman in navy scrubs with both arms folded tight, a gray-haired man with a dialysis bandage under his sleeve, a crossing guard in a discount store blazer with a soft cast on her wrist. Most people in that room had come for their own problems. By noon, all of them would remember Ethan Vale, S. Angela Romano called the case. Ethan walked forward with a smile that already felt rehearsed. "Good morning, Your Honor." Judge Caprio glanced up. "Good morning, sir. You're contesting a $500 municipal access lane citation issued to a vehicle registered to Ethan Vale Enterprises. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor. Frankly, the amount is absurd." There was nothing unusual about that sentence. People said that every day. Then the judge asked the question that changed the temperature in the room. "Were you present when the violation occurred?" Ethan slipped one hand into his pocket. "I was present nearby, yes." "Nearby?" "I stepped out briefly. My driver was instructed to remain close." Judge Caprio nodded. The report says the vehicle remained in the emergency lane for 11 minutes. Ethan let out a short laugh. Not a nervous one. Not embarrassed. A real laugh. The kind that says this is beneath me. He tilted his head and said, "Your Honor, with respect, my company spends more than $500 a month on bottled water. We are here over 11 minutes. A sound moved through the room before anyone meant to make it. A few soft gasps. A chair shifting. Someone in the back whispered, "Wow." Share this with someone who needs to see what happens when pride talks too soon. Judge Caprio did not raise his voice. He did not frown. He did not lean forward like TV judges do when they want a clip. He simply took off his glasses, folded them, and asked, "Mr. Vale, are you saying the amount is too small to matter, or that the rule was too small to obey?" That landed hard. Ethan's smile held F, or half a second too long. "I'm saying this feels like an inefficient use of the court's time." "Court time becomes inefficient," Judge Caprio said, "when people with means assume rules are for people without them." The room went still. That should have been the moment Ethan adjusted. It should have been the moment he apologized, paid, and walked out with his watch still shining, and his pride only slightly bruised. But arrogance is expensive because it convinces you the meter is broken. Ethan gave another little laugh, lower this time. "With respect, Judge, if every executive in this city had to appear in court for every brief stop in a pickup zone, nobody would be at work." Daniel Keene looked down, almost like he was letting Ethan finish digging. Judge Caprio turned one page in the file. "Mr. Keene, does the city have visual evidence?" "We do, Your Honor." "Play it." That was when Ethan's attorney should have spoken, except Ethan had chosen not to bring one. According to people who knew him, he said lawyers for a $500 ticket were a sign of weakness. According to the look on his face 3 minutes later, that opinion had changed. The monitor near the clerk's station flickered to life. Black and white surveillance footage from outside St. Agnes Community Clinic appeared on screen. The timestamp read 1/17/2026, 07:57:12. There was the lane, bright red curb, white stenciled letters, emergency access. A black Mercedes Maybach pulled in and stopped right across it, hazard lights blinking. The camera angle wasn't perfect, but everyone could see the rear of the SUV block, the painted ramp, and half the lane. At 07:57:49, a man stepped out from the rear passenger side. Brioni suit. Blue tie. Ethan Vale. He adjusted his cuffs, spoke through the open window, and walked toward the clinic entrance without looking back. At 07:59:11, Officer Lena Mora approached the vehicle. At 08:00:03, a woman pushing an older man in a wheelchair came down the ramp, stopped, then struggled to angle him around the front bumper into the street. At 08:01:28, another vehicle with medical markings slowed, could not clear the lane and had to reverse. At 08:03:07, Officer Mora wrote the citation. At 08:08:21, Ethan returned carrying a coffee tray, smiling at something on his phone. He took the citation from Officer Mora, looked at it, and even from silent footage you could tell he laughed. The gallery noticed it at the same time. This time the gasp was louder. Because now it wasn't an allegation. Now it was a picture. Judge Caprio let the final frame sit. "Mr. Vale," he said softly, "is that you?" Ethan cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor, but this is being made to look more dramatic than it was." The woman in navy scrubs behind him shut her eyes. The crossing guard with the cast gripped the edge of her seat. And the judge asked the question nobody in the room expected. "Ms. Romano, Would you please check whether Ethan Vale Enterprises has other unresolved municipal citations in this court? Ethan's expression changed for the first time. Not panic. Not yet. Just irritation. Your Honor, with respect, I am here on one matter. Judge Caprio looked at him over his glasses. Then, let us make sure it is only one matter. Angela Romano turned to her terminal. The keys clicked. Her face was neutral at first, then not. She looked up. Your Honor, she said, there are additional entries. How many? Angela swallowed. 99 unresolved citations connected to company vehicles registered under Ethan Vale Enterprises and 2 affiliated LLCs. The room made a sound all at once. Not loud. Worse. A low, stunned inhale from 20 people realizing they had just watched a crack turn into a canyon. Ethan turned toward the clerk. That cannot be right. Angela checked again. 31 for emergency lane obstruction, 22 for fire zone blocking, 15 for handicap ramp interference, 9 for loading zone overruns exceeding posted limits. The rest are assorted no-standing commercial violations, all unpaid or contested. Oldest entry is 14 months ago. Judge Caprio put his glasses back on. Mr. Bottled Water stopped smiling. And everyone in that room knew this was no longer about one ticket. What nobody knew yet was that those 99 citations were just the beginning. Because prosecutor Daniel Keene reached into his file, pulled out a thin red folder marked supplemental, and said the 7 words that made every neck in the room lift at once. Your Honor, the city has more evidence. If you can already feel where this is going, hit that like button, because the next 5 minutes turned a routine hearing into the most talked-about courtroom moment Providence had seen in years. Daniel Keene stepped forward and placed the red folder on the lectern like it weighed more than paper. Because the defendant contested the January 17th citation, the city reviewed related complaints involving the same corporate fleet. In that review, we uncovered a pattern, witness statements, and 2 incidents involving physical injury. That changed everything. Up to that point, Ethan still had a path. Embarrassing, yes. Costly, yes. But survivable. A wealthy CEO with a stack of unpaid parking violations was a bad headline. A wealthy CEO whose company culture had injured people because tickets were treated like convenience fees. That was different. That was the kind of story that crawled out of local court and onto every phone in the state before dinner. Judge Caprio folded his hands. Proceed. Keene nodded toward the first row. The city calls Officer Lena Mora. Officer Mora stood, walked to the witness area and swore in. She was in her mid-30s, compact, alert, hair in a tight bun. Her uniform was pressed flat, her badge polished. She looked like the kind of person who had long ago stopped mistaking expensive people for important people. Keene began simply. Officer Mora, were you on duty outside St. Agnes Community Clinic on January 17th at approximately 8 a.m.? I was. Did you issue a citation to the vehicle registered to Ethan Vale Enterprises? Yes. Why? Because it was stopped in a marked emergency lane and partially blocked the wheelchair ramp. Did you speak to the defendant? I did. What did he say? Officer Mora's face didn't change. He asked if the city had started charging admission for sidewalks. A few people in the gallery looked at Ethan, then away. Keene continued. Did you capture any of that interaction? Yes, my body camera was active. Play it. The screen changed. Now it was body cam footage, shaky and close, with street noise and winter wind hitting the microphone. Officer Mora's voice came through first. Sir, this lane is posted emergency access only. I need this vehicle moved now. Then Ethan's voice. Clear, confident, irritated. I'll be gone in 2 minutes. Sir, I'm already issuing the citation. Then make it quick. Some of us have jobs. That line got a reaction. Not outrage this time. Recognition. Because everyone had met that kind of person at least once. The one who treated your job like a delay in theirs. The footage continued. Officer Mora said, "A patient is trying to come down the ramp." Ethan looked over casually, then back at his phone. "She can go around." Not "she can wait." Not "I'm sorry." "She can go around." The body cam caught the woman with the wheelchair struggling at the curb, tires snagging on slush. It caught a metallic scraping sound. It caught Officer Mora jogging over to help. It caught Ethan stepping aside so his coffee wouldn't spill. Then came the part nobody in the room expected. Another voice. Older male. Breathing hard. Not Ethan. Not the officer. The man in the wheelchair. "I'm dizzy," he said. "Easy, easy." The footage cut. The silence afterward felt heavy enough to hear. Judge Caprio looked toward the gray-haired man seated behind Ethan. "Sir, were you the patient in that chair?" The man stood slowly. "Yes, Your Honor." His name was Henry Pollard, 78, retired dockworker. 3 days a week he came to St. Agnes for dialysis because his daughter worked double shifts at Rhode Island Hospital and couldn't always drive him farther. He wore a brown wool coat polished thin at the elbows and old black shoes that had been shined for court. Keene asked if he would like to speak. Henry nodded once. "My daughter pushed me down that ramp. We got stuck because of that truck. I tried to stand to help. My leg buckled. I hit the edge of the curb and twisted my knee. Thought it was nothing. Turned out I strained the joint and missed my next treatment because I couldn't get down the steps at home. That kind of delay matters when your kidneys don't work right." He wasn't dramatic. That made it worse. He wasn't trying to win sympathy. He was stating facts the way tired people do when they have no energy left for performance. Keene held up a document. "Your Honor, the city submits St. Agnes intake notes and treatment follow-up indicating a knee strain and disrupted dialysis schedule." "Admitted," said Judge Caprio. Ethan shifted. His chin lifted but less. The judge turned to him. "Mr. Vale, do you wish to ask this witness anything?" Ethan hesitated. "No, Your Honor." That was his first smart choice of the day. Then Keene said, "The city also calls Marisol Diaz." The woman with the cast stood. She was 61, with careful makeup, dark hair streaked silver, and the posture of somebody used to staying upright for other people's sake. She worked mornings as a crossing guard near Broad Street and afternoons helping at St. Agnes as a volunteer greeter because, in her words later, "Retirement is expensive and sitting still makes me sad." She held a folded piece of paper in one hand. Keene spoke gently. "Ms. Diaz, were you present during a separate incident involving a company vehicle registered to Ethan Vale Enterprises on December 3rd? "Yes." "What happened?" Marisol glanced at Ethan, then at Judge Caprio. "There was a black delivery van parked over the access stripes outside the clinic. Not in them, over them. A woman with a walker asked if I could help her get around. I stepped into the street to guide her. A turning car clipped the signpost beside me. I fell backward, broke my wrist." The room reacted again. Ethan looked confused now, not because he cared yet, but because this was clearly larger than he had believed possible. Keene held up photos: white van, company logo, curb paint, a bent aluminum sign, Marisol sitting on the sidewalk, face pinched in pain, one shoe half off. "Was there a citation issued?" "Yes." "Was it paid?" Angela Romano answered from the clerk's desk before Keene even asked. "No, sir. It remains unresolved under Vale Freight Corridor LLC, an affiliated entity. Ethan finally spoke. Your Honor, I have thousands of vehicle movements a week. I cannot personally review every citation. Judge Caprio's response came smooth and immediate. When your name is on the door, your choices are in the hallway whether you walk there or not. That line would have been quoted all over social media if phones had been allowed in the room. People in the gallery looked at each other like they knew they had just heard something they would repeat later almost word for word. Keene then did something subtle. He didn't push harder. He slowed down. That's how experienced prosecutors make pressure feel unavoidable. They don't shout. They arrange facts until denial starts to look childish. Ms. Diaz, he said, why did you bring a letter today? Marisol unfolded the paper with her good hand. Because I don't speak fancy when I get upset. Judge Caprio nodded. Take your time. She read, my grandson Nico is 12. He asked me why I still wear the bright yellow crossing vest even when my wrist hurts. I told him because little kids need someone to stand in the road and tell fast people that other lives are coming. On the day I fell, the man in the van never came out. He never saw me. Maybe that's the point of this whole thing. People who can afford to block the way never have to see who climbs around them. No one moved. Not the retired couple. Not the college kid. Not Ethan. Especially not Ethan. Because for the first time since entering the room, he looked less annoyed than unsettled. It would have been enough. For most judges, that already would have been enough to justify a stern ruling, a large assessment, maybe a referral. But Daniel Keene still had the red folder. And buried in it was the document that turned bad behavior into deliberate policy. Your Honor, he said, the city has one final exhibit before recommendation. He removed a printed email chain. Subject line, Time Savings Directive. Sender Operations Desk, Valaxis Logistics. Recipient list, Dispatch Supervisors, Executive Assistants, Fleet Coordinators. Dated 8 months before the January citation. Keene read one sentence aloud. For priority principals and medical-adjacent pickups, hold curbside if necessary. Tickets cost less than schedule slippage. The room didn't gasp this time. It just stared. Because a joke is one thing. A pattern is another. But a written directive. That was intent. That was math. And Ethan Vale's face lost its color for the first time that morning. Drop a comment telling us the exact moment you think he realized this was no longer a $500 problem, because the judge hadn't even reached the part that would force Ethan to choose between denial and the truth. Ethan asked to see the exhibit. Keene handed it over. It was only 3 pages, but Ethan read it like each line had gotten longer since the last time he saw it. At the bottom was a forwarding note from a senior compliance manager named Alicia Benton. It was addressed to the company's legal department and marked urgent. This directive creates liability exposure where public access is obstructed. No documented corrective action followed. Judge Caprio watched Ethan silently. So, the judge said at last, do you still believe this hearing is an inefficient use of the court's time? Ethan swallowed. Your Honor, I did not draft that language. Did you approve the culture that made it plausible? Ethan didn't answer. The judge turned to Keene. Is Ms. Benton present? She is, Your Honor. Alicia Benton rose from the second row. 39 years old, navy blazer, hair tied back, no jewelry except a plain wedding band. She had the exhausted look of someone who had spent months deciding whether doing the right thing was worth losing the life that came with doing the wrong thing quietly. She was sworn in. Keene asked, what was your role at Valaxis? Director of Compliance and Risk. How long? 4 years. Why did you leave? Alicia looked directly at Ethan before answering. Because every time I flagged repeat curb and access violations, I was told the city would cash the checks and everybody would move on. Who told you that? She held his gaze. Mr. Vale. A whisper moved through the room like a spark through dry grass. Ethan spoke immediately. That is a gross distortion. Alicia didn't even flinch. Keene asked, did you bring records? I did. She produced a binder. Not dramatic. Not flashy. That made it devastating. Inside were internal monthly compliance summaries, 14 in total. Highlighted entries showed repeated complaints from clinics, apartment buildings with wheelchair ramps, school pickup zones, and one fire station access point. Some notations had been escalated with recommended driver retraining or route policy changes. Several were marked closed with identical shorthand, fine processed, no further action. Keene placed the binder on the evidence stand. Judge Caprio leafed through the first few pages. On one report in blue ink beside a block of highlighted violations, someone had written, "Build it into cost of speed." The handwriting matched Ethan's signature on the appearance form. The judge looked up. Mr. Vale, is this your handwriting? Ethan's jaw tightened. It appears to be. The judge's voice stayed calm. Then let me tell you what appears to be happening here. It appears that your company did not accidentally collect citations. It appears you operationalized them. It appears public access and safety were reduced to a line item. Nobody breathed loudly enough to hear. Ethan straightened, maybe out of instinct, maybe because rich men often think posture can still rescue them after facts fail. With respect, Your Honor, businesses make imperfect logistical decisions every day. There was never any intent to harm anyone. Alicia Benton finally allowed emotion into her face. Intent, she said, not to the judge but to Ethan. I sent you 3 memos after St. Agnes complained. I asked for 5-minute idle bans. I asked for remote staging. I asked for disciplinary review when drivers blocked ramps. You told me, and I quote, I pay people to keep freight moving, not to cry over curb paint. Several heads in the gallery turned sharply toward Ethan. That was the outrage moment. The early one. The one where viewers at home would sit up straighter and say, out loud, no way. Ethan looked at the judge. This is a disgruntled former employee. Disgruntled employees sometimes bring the best records, Judge Caprio said. Another quote. Another clean strike. But the hearing still hadn't hit its deepest nerve. Because the city had one more witness. And this one didn't come holding reports. She came holding consequences. Her name was Naomi Reed, 32, a paramedic with Providence EMS. She wore dark blue service pants, black boots, and the kind of expression people earn after too many mornings where someone else's emergency depends on seconds. Keene asked, were you driving Medic Unit 4 on January 17th at approximately 8 a.m.? Yes. Did you approach St. Agnes during the incident in evidence? Yes. What happened? We attempted to pull into the designated medical access lane to pick up a transfer patient for transport. A black SUV was partially blocking it. We had to reverse, angle, and approach from the street side. It delayed our load. How long? 78 seconds from first stop to clear path. Why does that matter? Naomi answered without heat. Because when a patient is already in respiratory distress, everything matters. The silence after that line felt colder than the weather outside. Keene asked if the patient survived. She did, Naomi said, but she arrived at Rhode Island Hospital hypoxic and was admitted to ICU for monitoring. No melodrama. No accusation. Just that brutal clinical phrase. Everything matters. Judge Caprio rubbed the bridge of his nose once, slowly. Ethan, for the first time, looked less like a CEO and more like a man who had started hearing the shape of his own behavior from other people's mouths. He asked quietly, was she seriously injured because of that delay? Naomi answered the question like someone answering for the record, not for him. I am not here to tell the court 1 minute caused everything. I am here to say 1 minute never helps. That line hit so hard the college kid in the gallery actually whispered, damn. And everybody knew exactly why. Because the hearing was no longer about whether Ethan Vale had meant to be cruel. It was about whether a person could build a life so fast, so insulated, so optimized, that ordinary human inconvenience stopped registering as human at all. Judge Caprio leaned back. Mr. Vale, do you understand what is happening in this courtroom right now? Ethan answered too fast. Yes, Your Honor. The judge shook his head once. No, you understand risk. You understand exposure. You understand what this may cost your company. I'm asking whether you understand what happened to these people. Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That was the first real break in him. Smell. Visible. The kind most people would miss if they weren't looking for it. But Judge Caprio saw it. So did Marisol Diaz. So did Alicia Benton. So did every person in that room who had ever been told to move, wait, go around, or hold on because somebody wealthier had decided their urgency outranked everybody else. Like this video, if you believe the most dangerous kind of arrogance is the kind that mistakes inconvenience for innocence. The next turn came from somewhere almost nobody expected. Judge Caprio asked a question that had nothing to do with curb paint, vehicle logs, or legal exposure. Mr. Vale, where did you grow up? Ethan blinked. My childhood is not relevant. Answer the question. South Providence. What street? A pause. Almy Street. Judge Caprio nodded once, almost to himself. Near the old public clinics. Ethan hesitated. Yes. The judge looked down at the St. Agnes file, then back up. Did your mother ever bring you to a neighborhood clinic? The question landed strange in the room. Sideways, personal, dangerous in a different way. Ethan's throat moved. Yes. Did you ever need help getting inside? Daniel Keene looked toward the bench, realizing what the judge was doing and letting it happen. Ethan stared at the wood edge of the lectern. My mother worked mornings. Sometimes she'd bring me when I had asthma. He said it flat like facts from someone else's life. There were lines. Was it easy? No. Another pause. Then Judge Caprio asked the question that split Ethan's confidence clean through the middle. If a black truck had blocked the ramp while your mother was carrying you in and you couldn't breathe, would $500 have sounded like a lot? Nobody moved. Not even Ethan. Because there it was. Not legal. Moral. Personal. Undeniable. And for the first time that morning, the man who had laughed at a fine could not hide behind scale. His eyes dropped. Your Honors. But Judge Caprio lifted a hand. I'm not finished. The judge asked Angela Romano to read the outstanding citation summary into the record. One by one she did. Dates, plate numbers, locations, clinics, school zones, fire access, senior housing ramps, downtown loading lanes. More than once the same note appeared in the city complaint log. Driver stated company policy permitted temporary hold. By the 10th entry, the rhythm itself felt sickening. By the 20th, people weren't just listening. They were feeling accumulation. That is how real wrongdoing often works. Not through one spectacular evil, but through repetition so steady it teaches everybody beneath it to expect less. Then came the revelation at the 3,000-word mark of this story, the kind that changes the whole thing. One of the outstanding entries wasn't from a clinic. It was from St. Bartholomew School on Prairie Avenue. School zone, 7:31 a.m. Crosswalk visibility obstructed. Complainant, Marisol Diaz. Same Marisol. Same woman with the cast. Different incident. Same company. Keene asked her, Ms. Diaz, were you the complainant on this citation as well? She nodded. What happened? A Lexus sedan parked past the corner line where children cross. I had to step farther into the lane to see around it. A little boy named Owen Kaplan ran before I could stop traffic. He wasn't hit, thank God, but his backpack got clipped by a mirror and spun him around. He cried all morning. The room reacted with that sharp parent sound, half anger, half fear. Judge Caprio's face changed then. Not showy anger. Worse, disappointment with edges. He looked at Ethan and said, Your company did not merely collect tickets, it taught others to gamble with strangers. That quote sat in the air like a verdict before the verdict. Ethan's hands were no longer still. He placed them on the lectern, then removed them. His right thumb rubbed once over the edge of his watchband. The Maybach key fob in his jacket pocket made a small click when he shifted his weight. People notice tiny sounds when rooms go silent. And silence kept returning because each witness made the same point from a different angle. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a philosophy. One where wealth turned fines into permissions. One where speed mattered more than access. One where the people forced to go around never got invited into the meeting where that decision was made. The judge called a short recess. No more than 8 minutes. But those 8 minutes felt like an hour. Gallery emptied into the hallway, shoes on tile, low whispers, coffee from the vending machine, cold air every time the front doors opened. Nobody spoke to Ethan. He stood near a pillar checking his phone, then stopped checking it because he had already seen too many messages. His chief of staff had called 3 times, legal counsel twice. A local reporter had texted him from a number he didn't recognize with one question. Are you in Providence Court this morning regarding city safety violations? That was how far. So these things spread. Not because millions were watching yet. Because one courthouse clerk tells a cousin. One witness texts a friend. One intern in city legal recognizes a name. One staffer at a logistics company gets nervous and starts forwarding. Viral moments do not begin online. They begin in rooms where everybody suddenly realizes they are seeing something people will want to believe happened exactly the way it did. In the hallway, Henry Pollard lowered himself carefully onto a bench. Naomi Reed stood by the window, arms crossed. Marisol Diaz unwrapped a sandwich from wax paper but barely ate it. Alicia Benton sat alone for a moment, looking at the floor like she had been waiting a year for this day and still wasn't sure it would make her feel better. Judge Caprio remained inside chambers. And Ethan Vale, for the first time in a very long time, was left standing in public without a single person trying to impress him. That can be a terrifying experience for someone who has built his identity on making rooms bend. When court resumed, the air felt charged. Judge Caprio returned, settled into his chair, and looked directly at Ethan. Mr. Vale, before the court hears recommendation, I want to give you an opportunity, not to explain your balance sheet, not to explain logistics, to explain your thinking. Ethan inhaled slowly. This was the choice moment. The one where he could still cling to ego or step into truth. I built my company from nothing, he began. I slept in warehouses, I made deliveries myself. I've worked every holiday you can name. When you're responsible for payroll, timing matters. Delays matter. Clients don't care why something got held up. They just punish you for it. So yes, our system's focused on speed. Judge Caprio listened without expression. Ethan continued, voice flatter now. That doesn't mean I wanted anyone hurt. No, said the judge. It means you stopped asking what your speed was costing other people. A small murmur of approval came from the back. Ethan glanced over his shoulder, maybe irritated, maybe ashamed that anonymous people in folding chairs now felt entitled to judge him. Then something in his face changed again. A calculation failed. He looked back at the bench and said, quieter, maybe I did. That was the first honest sentence he had spoken all day. But wait, there was more. Because Daniel Keene hadn't yet made the city's recommendation. And when he did, several people in the room physically straightened. Your Honor, he said, the city recommends consolidation of the unresolved fleet citations before this court to the extent permitted by municipal procedure, immediate assessment of the full outstanding penalty balance, referral to code enforcement for enterprise review, and a restitution hearing regarding documented injuries and disruptions. Judge Caprio asked, what is the outstanding penalty total? Angela Romano answered, $50,000 even, Your Honor. There it was. The number from the title. The number people would remember. $500 multiplied not by anger, not by theatrics, but by truth. 100 tickets. One culture. One man who laughed too soon. The room reacted all over again. Someone in the gallery whispered, 50. Someone else said, good. Ethan's eyes lifted sharply. Your Honor, that figure includes matters not noticed for this hearing. Daniel Keene replied, the defendant was served on all unresolved entries or affiliated corporate agents of record were. The city has brought the summary today because the defendant personally challenged the latest citation, placing the pattern at issue. Ethan turned toward Angela. There must be an error. We have accounts payable that handles municipal notices. Judge Caprio did not let him run there. Mr. Vale, when you laugh at a $500 fine, do not be surprised when the court asks how many other $500 fines you treated the same way. That quote hit like a gavel even before the real one came. Hit subscribe if you believe some people don't change until the total reflects the truth they were hiding from. Ethan asked for time to contact counsel. Judge Caprio granted him 10 minutes. Not an adjournment. Not a continuance. 10 minutes. The kind of mercy that still feels like pressure. When the court paused again, Ethan finally called the people he should have brought in the first place. He stepped into the corridor, voice low and clipped. The first call went to his general counsel, Myra Talbot. The second to his chief operating officer, Leon Fry. The third went unanswered and was marked home. Nobody knew then who he had tried to call at home. That would matter later. When he returned, something was different. Not fixed. Not redeemed. But cracked. His tie was loosened half an inch. He had taken off the poddeck and placed it in his jacket pocket, as if he suddenly understood that flashy things can become insults under fluorescent lights. Judge Caprio re-enter. Ed. Mr. Vale, have you had the opportunity to confer with counsel? Yes, Your Honor. Counsel is available by speakerphone if the court allows. It does. Myra Talbot's voice came through the courtroom speaker, precise and controlled. Your Honor, on behalf of Mr. Vale and related entities, we request an opportunity to review the consolidated citation record and discuss resolution. Judge Caprio said, you may review, but this court is not pausing the moral facts while lawyers count pages. I will hear from your client now, then I will rule on what is immediately before me. Ethan looked down once, then up. This was where many rich men become more polished, more strategic, more fake. He surprised the room by not doing that. Not fully, anyway. I was arrogant, he said. The room didn't move. Maybe because nobody expected it. Maybe because apologies from powerful people are so often rehearsed that everyone waits for the hidden clause. I thought this was small, Ethan continued. I thought it was a ticket. I thought it was administrative. I did not come in here prepared to hear people speak about my decisions that way. Judge Caprio's eyes stayed on him. Because you were not prepared to see them that way. Ethan nodded, almost imperceptibly. Alicia Benton stared ahead. Marisol Diaz looked down at her letter. Henry Pollard folded his hands. Naomi Reed remained unreadable. The judge asked, "Do you deny the policy reflected in these records?" Ethan took too long answering. That mattered, because truthful answers often arrive quick when innocent. He finally said, "I deny that I meant for anyone to be endangered." That was not my question. Ethan shut his eyes for 1 second. No, I do not deny that our culture tolerated tickets as operational cost. There it was. The moment of realization dialogue shift the whole room had been waiting for. He had come in sounding like a man above the process. Now he sounded like a man inside it. Judge Caprio leaned forward slightly. "Mr. Vale, the law is not impressed by a watch, a title, or a car key. It is impressed by conduct." Another quote. Another one people watching at home would instantly repeat. Then the judge did something only wise authority figures know how to do. He shifted from punishment toward mirror. "Tell me the truth. When did you start believing efficiency excused disrespect?" Ethan's face tightened, and for a second it looked like he would shut down again. Then he said, "When I got successful enough that nobody around me said no." Nobody wrote that line for him. That's why it sounded true. The gallery reacted softly, not with outrage this time, but with the strange recognition that sometimes the ugliest sentences are also the most revealing. Judge Caprio asked, "Who used to say no?" Ethan looked away from the courtroom and toward somewhere older than the room. "My mother." There it was again. That sideways door into a human being he had spent years locking shut. "What was her name?" asked the judge. "Denise Vale." "What did she do?" "She cleaned offices downtown, nights, sometimes mornings at a diner." "And what did she teach you?" Ethan let out a breath that almost trembled. "That if someone has to move because of you, you'd better have a good reason." The room went utterly still. Because now the story had turned. Not away from accountability. Deeper into it. This was no longer just a CEO being exposed. It was a son hearing his own mother testify through his memory against the man he had become. You could see it happen in his face. The hard jaw loosened. The eyes stopped challenging and started absorbing. And still, Judge Caprio did not let him off the hook. "Then your problem is not ignorance," the judge said. "It is betrayal." That word hit hardest of all. Not because it was loud. Because it was exact. Ethan's shoulders dropped. The man in the Brioni suit suddenly looked tired enough to be wearing every unpaid ticket at once. The city prosecutor, sensing the shift, could have gone for blood. Instead, he went for clarity. "Your Honor, the city's position is simple. Wealth insulated the defendant from the consequences of routine misconduct. The court now has the opportunity to reunite cost with conscience." That line was sharp enough to cut glass. Judge Caprio nodded. Then came the emotional breakdown the pattern demanded. Not from a victim. From Ethan. It didn't look theatrical, no dramatic collapse, no sobbing confession. It looked like a 42-year-old man, realizing that he had optimized himself into someone he would have hated at 16. "My mother took me to St. Agnes once," he said suddenly, voice rougher now. "I was 9, couldn't breathe. She carried me because the elevator was out and she didn't trust me on the stairs. She was late to work. She cried in the waiting room because she thought they'd fire her. He swallowed. I remember a volunteer brought me orange juice after the inhaler kicked in. Marisol Diaz slowly lifted her eyes. Saint. Agnes volunteer. The room understood before Ethan did. He looked at her. Really looked. Maybe for the first time all morning. And he asked in a smaller voice than anyone had yet heard from him, "Were you there?" Marisol blinked, surprised. "I've been there a long time," she said. He stared for one beat, then two. "I remember a woman with silver hoops who told my mother not to apologize for being scared." Marisol touched one earlobe, even now tiny silver hoops. The gallery felt it at once. That impossible collision of memory and consequence. That brutal little twist of fate. The woman his company had repeatedly treated like an obstacle may have once comforted his mother when he was a wheezing child in a public clinic. Nobody breathed. Judge Caprio let the silence do the work. Because some revelations do more in 10 seconds than arguments do in 10 pages. Like this video, if you believe life has a way of bringing people back to the exact lesson they tried to outrun. Ethan looked shattered now, but the judge still had to do the job. "Mr. Vale, the court recognizes remorse when it arrives, but remorse after exposure is not the same as character before it." Ethan nodded once. "I know." "Do you?" Another pause. "No," Ethan said, "I'm learning." That was the breakthrough. The real one. Not an apology crafted for headlines. An admission that transformation begins with the humiliation of not yet being who you should have been. Judge Caprio reviewed the clerk's summary again, then asked Daniel Keene and Myra Talbot to approach. They spent several minutes discussing procedural authority, affiliate registration, notice history, and whether the court could enter immediate judgment on the unresolved municipal balance while reserving separate civil claims. It wasn't flashy. It was legal. It mattered. Authentic cases turn not only on emotion but on mechanism. Angela Romano confirmed notice service through registered corporate agents and direct executive office delivery on multiple dates. Keene confirmed the city was prepared to proceed on aggregate assessment. Myra Talbot, now more pragmatic than combative, requested leniency in structure if not amount. Judge Caprio returned to the microphone. "Here is what the court is prepared to do." Every spine in the room seemed to straighten. First, on the January 17th citation, the court finds the violation established by video evidence and witness testimony. Second, based on uncontested service records and the defendant's acknowledgments regarding enterprise practice, the court consolidates the outstanding municipal citations presently before this bench for immediate assessment. Third, the court enters total municipal penalties in the amount of $50,000. Gasps. Not polite ones. Real ones. Even though everyone knew the number by then, hearing it out loud made it heavier. Ethan shut his eyes. The judge continued. That amount reflects not one mistake, but 100 decisions, some made at the curb, others made in a boardroom. There it was. The cleanest summary of the entire story. 100 decisions. Not one bad day. Not one unlucky moment. A system. Then came the consequence moment. Payment terms will be structured through counsel within 10 business days. Failure to comply will result in enforcement proceedings and referral for further action. Ethan nodded, almost numb. But Judge Caprio wasn't done. "However," he said, and the whole room leaned in, "money alone does not educate the conscience." That was the "but wait, there's more" twist. Because everyone expected the number to be the end. It was. "Before I finalize ancillary orders," the judge said, I want to hear from the people harmed about what justice looks like to them. This was unusual enough to electrify the room. First, Henry Pollard. He rose with effort. I want the fines paid, he said, but I also want those vans nowhere near clinic ramps again. I'm old, Judge. I don't need revenge. I need room. Then Naomi Reed. I want route compliance and staging rules near medical facilities. I don't need him ruined. I need him useful. Then Alicia Benton. I want the company to stop teaching young managers that legality is a spreadsheet problem. People copy what leadership celebrates. Then Marisol Diaz. She stood slowly, paper in hand. And what she said changed the emotional direction of the whole hearing. I want him to remember us. That line hit with unusual force because it was smaller than people expected. No big demand. No dramatic speech. Just that. I want him to stop paying to forget, she continued. $500 here, $500 there, and every time he wrote the check, he got to keep his day and we kept the bruise, the delay, the fear. So yes, make him pay. But don't let the money be the part he remembers most. Judge Caprio nodded slowly. What should he remember most? Marisol looked directly at Ethan. That people who go around your car still exist after you drive away. It was one of the most devastating lines of the day, because it said everything about power in one sentence. Ethan's face folded then, not into self-pity, into grief. Maybe for them, maybe for himself, maybe for the distance between who he had been and who he had become. He wiped once at his eye and seemed almost embarrassed by the gesture. There was your unexpected compassion moment. Not the judge softening first. Not the victims asking for blood. A woman with a broken wrist, refusing to reduce justice to humiliation. Judge Caprio took it in. Then he turned to Ethan. You have heard the fine, now hear the opportunity. The room went silent so fast it almost rang. I am entering the $50,000 municipal assessment. That stands. In addition, I am ordering, as conditions associated with this court's compliance review and in coordination with City Council, that your enterprise submit within 30 days a written access safety policy covering clinic zones, school perimeters, ramps, fire lanes, and senior housing curb lines. I am further ordering personal attendance by you at a city access and mobility roundtable to hear from affected residents and emergency personnel. Finally, I strongly recommend voluntary restitution discussions with the named individuals in St. Agnes Community Clinic. If you want this day to become a turning point instead of a headline, then prove it in behavior, not language. That was Judge Caprio at his most powerful. Not theatrical. Surgical. He had delivered punishment and path in the same breath. Ethan nodded quickly. Yes, Your Honor. The judge held up a hand. Do not yes, Your Honor me out of shame. Listen carefully. Respect is cheaper than arrogance and pays better in the long run. Another quote. Another line built to live beyond the courtroom. Ethan drew a shaky breath. I understand. Judge Caprio looked straight at him. No, but you may. That one sent a visible shiver through the room. Even Daniel Keene looked down to hide a reaction. Because it was the perfect judicial line, firm, compassionate, unforgettable. And still the story had one more twist. Just when everyone believed the hearing was over, Myra Talbot's voice came through the courtroom speaker again. Your Honor, my client asks leave to make one additional statement. Judge Caprio allowed it. Ethan turned not to the bench, but to Marisol Diaz. I'm sorry, he said. Simple. No legal padding. No if anyone was offended. Just I'm sorry. Then to Henry. I'm sorry. To Naomi. I'm sorry. To Alicia. I should have listened. That last one hit hard because it wasn't generic. It was specific. She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "You should have." No music could have improved that beat. No editing trick. Just truth. Then Ethan said something nobody in the room expected. "My mother is alive," he said quietly. "She lives in Cranston. I haven't told her I'm here. I don't want her hearing about this from someone else." Judge Caprio regarded him for a moment. "Call her before the press does." The gallery released the first soft laugh of the day. Not cruel. Human. And that small laugh mattered, because it meant the room had moved from fury to possibility. It also meant Ethan now had to do the hardest thing for men like him. He had to leave court and enter the rest of his life changed in public. Share this with someone who thinks real justice is punishment with a purpose, because what happened after the ruling mattered almost as much as the ruling itself. Outside the courthouse, local reporters were already gathering, tipped off by courthouse traffic and the unmistakable magnetism of a recognizable name. News vans had not yet formed a line, but 2 cameras and 3 phones were enough. Ethan emerged with Myra Talbot at his side and Leon Fry rushing up from the curb, face pale, tie crooked, hair windblown. "Do not speak," Myra murmured. Ethan looked at the cameras, then at Marisol, stepping carefully down the courthouse stairs. Then at Henry. Then at Naomi. Then at Alicia, who was leaving alone. He ignored the lawyer. "I'll make a statement," he said. Myra closed her eyes for half a second, the way lawyers do when a client chooses risk over strategy. Cameras lifted. Microphones extended. Ethan stood on the granite steps, Providence wind cutting through his coat, and said, "This morning I came to court believing I was dealing with a minor fine. I was wrong. The court and the witnesses made clear that my company treated public safety and access as secondary to speed. That is my responsibility. We will pay the full assessed amount. We will review every route, every policy, every executive privilege that made this possible. And I have apologized to the people I should have considered before I ever walked into that building." A reporter shouted, "Did Judge Caprio humiliate you?" Ethan answered without looking away. "No, he stopped me from humiliating myself further." That line spread fastest. Because it was honest. And sharp and rare. By evening, clips from courthouse steps and second-hand retellings from inside the room were everywhere local. Morning radio played the quotes. Comment sections exploded. Some people loved the fine. Some said it should have been higher. Some said rich executives only act sorry when cameras appear. Others focused on Marisol Diaz and her line about people still existing after you drive away. Millions would not watch that exact hearing, not officially, because no viral upload captured every second. But everybody in Providence who heard the story told it the same way. Rich CEO laughs at $500. Judge finds $50,000. Woman with broken wrist asks to be remembered. And somehow that last part is what most people could not forget. The weeks that followed became the real test. Because court apologies are easy compared with recurring habits. 3 days after the ruling, Vail-Axis Logistics released a written statement announcing full payment of the municipal penalties, an outside safety audit, suspension of executive curbside allowances, and mandatory staging policies for all company vehicles near medical and school zones. People were skeptical. Fairly. Corporate reform language often means new fonts and old behavior. But then details started showing up that were harder to fake. A city filing confirmed the $50,000 had been paid within 7 business days. St. Agnes Community Clinic announced a new covered patient access lane improvement funded by a private donation not legally required under the ruling. The donor name was not initially public, but everybody guessed correctly. Marisol Diaz received a handwritten note, not typed, with a check covering lost wages and physical therapy costs. She showed the note to no one for 6 days. Then Nico, her grandson, told his mother, who told a neighbor, who told somebody at church, and that is how people learned what it said. It did not say, "I regret any inconvenience." It said, "I built a life where I stopped seeing the people beneath the schedule. You made me see them again. I am sorry for the pain and fear my company caused you." Henry Pollard got a similar letter, along with a promise that Valaxis would fund monthly transportation vouchers for mobility-limited clinic patients for 1 year. Naomi Reed's EMS unit received nothing personal, which she preferred, but Providence EMS did receive a fleet coordination meeting request from Valaxis with proposed no-stop digital geofencing near emergency access points. And Alicia Benton. She received a phone call. Not from legal. From Ethan. At first she did not answer. Then he left a voicemail. "You were right. That doesn't fix what happened, but I'm done pretending you were difficult when you were actually responsible." She saved the message and said nothing about it. Then came the unexpected twist around 7,000 words into this story, the thing nobody saw coming. 2 months later, Ethan Vale returned to St. Agnes Community Clinic without cameras. No press release. No branded check. No event banner. Just Ethan, a dark wool coat, no tie, and a folding chair in a community room that smelled faintly of coffee, bleach, and old radiator heat. It was the city access and mobility round table Judge Caprio had referenced. People expected attorneys. Ethan came himself. There were 9 attendees around the table. A wheelchair user from Elmwood, a mother of twins with autism who needed curb stability at school pickup, a legally blind veteran, Naomi Reed from EMS, Henry Pollard's daughter Camille, Alicia Benton as an invited compliance consultant, and Marisol Diaz. Ethan sat at the far side and did something that would have been unthinkable in the courtroom. He listened for 2 hours without interrupting. He took notes by hand. He asked what markings were hardest to see in winter slush. He asked how long a driver idling just a minute really felt when you were waiting with oxygen tanks or a child who bolted unpredictably. He asked what corporate training usually got wrong. He wrote down phrases. "Feels like you're erased. Makes us negotiate with danger. You get time back, we get stress." Every one of those phrases stayed with him. At the end of the meeting, when most people had put on coats and gathered their bags, Marisol stayed behind. She found Ethan stacking chairs. A wealthy CEO stacking chairs in a clinic basement is not redemption by itself. But it is not nothing either. She asked him, "Why are you really here?" He answered after a pause, "Because $50,000 hurt my pride for a day. Hearing all of you hurt something deeper." Marisol studied him. "You want forgiveness?" He shook his head. "I want not to become that man again." She nodded once. "That's harder." This was the forgiveness twist, but not the fake kind where victims rush to absolve the powerful because the story needs sentiment. Marisol did not release him. She simply gave him a direction. "You remember Chill Dren?" she asked. "Yes." "You remember clinics?" "Yes." "Then build your company like those people exist before you arrive, not after you get caught." That may have been the best advice anyone gave him. And he treated it that way. Within 4 months, Valaxis had installed route lockouts preventing executive drivers from stopping in marked access lanes longer than 30 seconds unless logged for emergency. Repeated violations triggered automatic review. Dispatch supervisors lost bonuses if their teams collected zone access citations. New driver training included body cam footage from public municipal examples, anonymized where necessary, and a module titled The Cost of Just a Minute. Alicia Benton was hired back on a consultancy basis to redesign compliance reporting so executives could not bury risk in monthly summaries. People still doubted him. Good. Transformation without skepticism is just branding. But then something happened that changed public opinion more than any statement ever could. In late June at 7:26 a.m., a Valaxis executive sedan approached St. Bartholomew School. The driver pulled past the corner. The in-car system sounded an alert, restricted line-of-sight zone, reverse required. The driver backed up and staged properly. Marisol Diaz, standing in her yellow vest, saw it happen. She later told Nico, "That car remembered us." That sentence traveled. Because it was a small victory, but a visual one. A camera-ready moment without a camera. The world often thinks justice means one dramatic day in court. Sometimes it means a child crosses the street because a policy finally learned his life counts. Hit that subscribe button if you believe real accountability isn't what someone says under pressure. It's what they change when no one is clapping. By August, the case had become a reference point in local business circles. Chamber breakfasts mentioned it. Compliance seminars cited it anonymously. Younger managers in logistics and delivery firms joked darkly about the Caprio math, meaning one arrogant ticket that turns into a quarter's worth of consequences. Some executives hated that phrase. Others quietly appreciated it because it finally gave them leverage to push back against reckless demands from above. And Ethan. He stopped arriving at places like a man who owned time. He started arriving early. That wasn't a metaphor, it was observable. At a warehouse ribbon cutting in Pawtucket, he parked in the back and walked. At a charitable breakfast near Kennedy Plaza, witnesses noticed him circle the block rather than idle in a bus zone. At a city mobility panel, he introduced Alicia Benton before himself and publicly credited her for trying to fix what I chose not to see. That line made headlines in local business news. So did the photo taken that same day. No Brioni suit. No Hermes tie. Just a plain navy jacket, open collar, and a man who looked older in a better way. Still, the story needed one final emotional payoff. And it came from a letter. Not from a victim this time. From Ethan's mother. 3 months after the ruling, Judge Caprio received an envelope addressed in careful cursive. Clerk Angela Romano opened and logged it as correspondence related to MC 261147. Inside was a 2-page handwritten note from Denise Vale of Cranston, Rhode Island. The judge later shared portions with permission during a civic awards breakfast where he spoke about dignity, accountability, and public trust. People in that room said you could hear forks stop against plates when he read it. The letter said, "Your Honor, my son called me from the courthouse steps before I saw the news. He was crying in a way I had not heard since he was little. He told me, 'Ma, I forgot who I was trying not to become.' I want you to know something. Poverty did not make my son good and money did not make him bad. Fear made him hard. Success made that hardness profitable. I am grateful somebody finally made him sit still long enough to hear himself." That would have been enough. Then came the line nobody forgot. "You did not shame my son. You introduced him to the bill he had been sending other people." That was it. That was the philosophy at the center of everything. Justice is not always destruction. Sometimes it is delivery. The bill arrives. And for once, the powerful person has to sign for it personally. When that letter became public, sympathy didn't replace accountability. It deepened it. People began talking less about Ethan as a cartoon villain and more about how easy it is for ambition to turn empathy into inefficiency if no one interrupts the process. Viewers, listeners, readers, neighbors, everybody started mapping the story onto their own life. Where do I act like time is mine and inconvenience belongs to someone else. Where do I make small choices that feel large only to the people forced around them? That is why stories like this travel. Not because a rich man got humbled, because everybody fears the quiet ways they themselves might become blind. And yes, there was still satisfaction in the number. $50,000. Justice served. A clean, concrete consequence. But the deeper satisfaction came from something harder to measure. A policy changed. A clinic safer. A crossing guard scene. A company taught that access is not decorative. A son forced to hear his mother again. By November, St. Agnes Community Clinic unveiled the improved patient drop-off corridor. Fresh paint, better bollards, winter-visible markings, heated anti-slip strips on the ramp. A small plaque near the sidewall thanked several donors, city agencies, and community advocates for mobility dignity. No corporate logos. Marisol attended with Nico. Henry Pollard came in a wheelchair this time, grumbling cheerfully about the cold. Naomi Reed stopped by between shifts. Alicia Benton stood near the back, arms folded, taking in the strange sight of infrastructure as apology. Ethan arrived last. Not fashionably late. Actually last, because he had waited outside until everybody else had entered. When he stepped in, conversation thinned. Not hostile. Not warm. Earned caution. He walked directly to Marisol. "I wanted to ask if you'd cut the ribbon," he said. She blinked. "This was your money." "No," he replied, "it was my debt." That line spread too. Because it was the right kind of quote, not polished enough to sound invented, just true enough to live. Marisol looked at the scissors, then at Nico, then back at Ethan. "You cut it with me," she said. So they did. Together. Cameras from 2 local stations caught the image. Silver-haired volunteer with healing wrist.